Phantasmal Flames has arrived, and today we're going to be looking at over 30 different deck lists for all your favourite Pokemon decks. Whether it's brand new archetypes, updates to the best meta decks right now, or some cool rogue picks that have started to pop up in Japan, this video is going to have all of the lists for you to try out and jump straight into PTCG Live with. Let us know what deck you're most excited to play down below in the comments, and let's jump straight into things. First up then, we have a version of the Mega Absol Mega Kangaskhan deck. This is going to be utilising a 101 Mega Gengar line. Obviously Mega Gengar is already out in the new League Battle decks, but it's officially legal for play alongside the Phantasmal Flames set. Sticking in a 101 Gengar and one Rare Candy means your Mega Absols actually only give up 2 prizes, and your Yveltal gives up 0 prizes, and then things like Petch and Fez only give up 1 prize. So it can also throw off some prize mapping strategies that some decks have against this deck, which can sometimes be one of the issues of the deck. Having 2 of your main attackers give up 3 prize cards can sometimes mean certain decks have very easy lines to winning the game against you. So introducing the Mega Gengar into the list lets you kind of protect that strategy a little bit and make your Mega Absols even more annoying, because 280 HP 2 prize Pokemon is even more annoying than 280 HP 3 prize Pokemon. So yeah, we still think this deck is going to be good. There's going to be a couple of other ways we're going to be talking about this deck later on, but the first one is implementing this 101 Gengar package into the list. Next up, we have Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl doesn't gain too many cards from the new set, and it's actually hurt by the new Battle Cage Stadium. It's one of the only decks that actually is really hurt by it because of Frostlass ticking over in between turns. It means that you don't really have an opportunity to respond to the Battle Cage, so there are definitely some issues with Grimmsnarl, but it still seems like it's going to be a really solid pick. There's still lots of evolution decks right now that are going to be punished by all of the damage counters Grimmsnarl can place. We also don't think Battle Cage is going to be in too many decks. There's only a couple of decks that have the luxury of playing it, and it's only ever going to be like a 2 of, so it's likely there'll only ever be 1 or 2 turns where Frostlass doesn't get your the damage on the board because of Freezing Shroud going in between turns rather than you having an opportunity to respond to it. So Grimmsnarl seems really good still. Like I say, no new cards in the list, just this is our most up-to-date Grimmsnarl list if you want to jump into the ladder. Definitely some ways you could play this with Gengar and stuff like that as well, but we think just being as cookie cutter as possible, taking some of the best lists out there right now and trying to build Grimmsnarl how we know it works very well is going to be the best placed way to try and do well with the archetype. Onto a fun one then, here is Alakazam. This is definitely a deck that a lot of people enjoyed in the first few weeks of the Mega Evolution format, and it's one that really gets better, I think, with the Phantasmal Flames format. Dawn means the deck draws a boatload of cards. Dawn gets you basically the Dunsparce plus Alakazam plus a basic, which is really important to keep getting the Dunsparces back into play after you use Runaway Draw. But it basically turns Dawn into a +6, which is very good, plus also then you can draw into more Alakazam or Kadabra pieces or more to Dunsparces. But then also alongside Hilda's being like +7s when you've got Enriching plus the Dunsparce in there as well, you have a lot of very, very powerful draw supporters that are also tutoring out the Pokemon you need when the deck basically just needs to be cycling Pokemon every single turn. So yeah, I've had a play around with this one. It's actually really fun. Wonder Patch is also really good for the deck because it means that you do have the luxury of being able to play Enriching for turn, shuffle them back in with Runaway Draw, and still being able to use Wondrous Patch to set up your Alakazams to use powerful hands. So against any of the decks that don't have any hand disruption, this seems really, really powerful. We also have the Battle Cages in here to at least try and represent a little bit of an argument against things like Dragapult and Gardevoir. These matchups are definitely still unfavored. You're going to have to work out ways of winning those, trying to maybe lock in a Battle Cage on a key turn that you can hopefully really hope your opponent isn't able to, I guess, do much about it. But obviously, because we don't play any hand disruption ourselves, it's a little bit more awkward. So yeah, they're more of a they're more wishful thinking, I guess, than definitely securing up the matchup. But it does help a little bit. It can take away some 2 prize turns from the Dragapults and Gardevoirs, and maybe that's all you need if you've had a pretty hot start or they've had a slow start. So yeah, it's still got some issues with the top tier decks, but it is a fun one. Like I say, I've already tried this one out in the first few hours of hours and days of the format, but even just with some Dawn pre-Battle Cage, and it's just a lot of fun. So definitely recommend having a go with this one, just to try and bully some of the aggro 2 prize decks that don't play too much hand disruption. On to the first of a few different Charizard lists then. This is going to be one that's really making use of the new Megazard and Oricorio. Obviously, you can see there's no Dusknoir line in this. Instead, we're just leaning into the Megazard and the Oricorio. I think it definitely loses some flexibility in doing so, but it does give you like a real big bang approach of being able to deal with some of these Megas. Obviously, Mega Charizard also works as a cornerstone counter, which is nice. So yeah, it just gives you a different sort of angle on some of the other matchups. I still think the Dusknoir is important for trying to manipulate prizes in some of the other like stage 2 archetypes and evolving archetypes, but this feels like it's a little bit better versed into some of the aggressive archetypes where maybe Charizard's damage wouldn't quite get there in the early instances of the game. Sometimes Megazard can be the first thing that you're putting out and pressuring, and when you've got things like Chiro to be able to pick it up after it's taken a hit, you can sometimes do that without having to worry too much about the liability of it being a 3-prize Pokemon. We've got Dawn in here as well. Obviously Dawn is a great supporter for decks like this. We've got stage 2 lines that are all both really important to get into play, but also having multiple different attackers and obviously being able to set up multiple Charmeleons and find the pieces for your Pidgeotto line. It's all really important. So Dawn often like weaves together the bits and bobs that you need, and in combination with Rare Candy, Dawn plus Pidgeot can often get you pretty much any attacker out of the gate, which is really nice. And also being able to use Dawn to search for Megazard plus Oricorio to then sort of accelerate a boatload of energy onto your board is very nice as well. We've got the couple of Battle Cage in here as well, just to respect Dragapult. Still think the Dragapult matchup is a little bit iffy, but the fact we can kind of lock in an Iono plus Battle Cage play can sometimes mean they're not able to bounce the stadium, and we can keep up in that matchup. Obviously, we've got the Maximum Belt as well, which is really nice, and the Megazard is, again, good at taking out that first Dragapult, so you don't have to give up too many prizes before the normal Charizard EX can do so. So you've kind of got Megazard for the first one, and then you can use your Charizard for the second one as well. So I think we have a little bit more potential into Dragapult lines with this list, but it's definitely still a little bit awkward, but Battle Cage for sure definitely helps out in that matchup too. Here's an updated Gholdengo Rocks list then. There's actually no new cards in this list. This is just an updated version. This is the pretty much play as consistently as possible version that we kind of like over here at OmniPoke. It's just trying to do things as consistently as possible. We've got high counts for of all of the important cards. We're playing Prime Catcher over Precious Trolley. Joe's always been very fond of not playing Precious Trolley. Feels like it's a bit of a wasted slot, and I've definitely come to that agreement as well when we're already playing things like Fighting Gongs and Nest Balls anyway. So just putting the Buddy Poffins in means that you have space for a really powerful ace spec in Prime Catcher, which is very nice. Other than that, we've still got obviously the cornerstone answers and things like that in the Mega Mawile, and we've got a couple of Churros and all that good stuff to help against Dragapult, alongside the Picnic Basket as well. Vitband still feels really important for Zoroark, as well as just getting you over the line against a couple of specific breakpoints with Gholdengo, meaning that you don't have to discard an extra energy now and again. So yeah, super consistent sort of build of Gholdengo Rocks. No new cards here, but just wanted to give you our most up-to-date list if you're just looking to play something that you know, tried and tested on the ladder for the first few days while you accumulate all of the packs and build yourself up on the battle pass. Here's the first of one of our Lopunny lists then. This is Dusknoir Lopunny. This is a deck that is built around really trying to abuse Curse Blast from Dusclops and Dusknoir, alongside the pure efficiency of Lopunny's EX's both of its attacks, the Shred attack, but also the first attack that deals 230 if you've moved in from the active spot. Obviously, we've got 4 Jets in here. We've got the Prime Catcher, but also being able to use the Dusknoirs as pivots is very, very powerful, because you can actually end up having enough damage to take out Mega Pokemon with just 1 Curse Blast from Dusknoir plus a Lopunny attack, which is very powerful. We've got the 1 prize attacker in here in the new Moltres. Obviously, that's really good against some of the EX Pokemon that are weak to fire, things like the Teal Mask, but also with the Dusclops damage, you're able to get into KO and Gholdengo ranges, which obviously some of these Megas are often scared of, because Gholdengo often trades up against them. So yeah, it's a very, very unique list. It's, I think, a way of trying to really abuse how powerful the Lopunny is. It feels a little bit like Dusk in some ways, where you early game use Budgie, try and slow the opponent down, and then you represent a very, very powerful board that you're going to try and basically take as many resources out of on your opponent's side as quickly as possible with all of the Dusclops and Dusknoirs, plus also, again, having some very efficient attackers. So it kind of feels Dragadusky to me a little bit. We are able to lean into it being a Mega with things like Wally's Compassion as well. So lots of cool things you can do with this list. I'm not convinced whether this list or the Poison package looks best so far. Still need to do some testing with that, but definitely a fun one to try out. I think there's a lot of potential here, and yeah, just the raw efficiency of Lopunny I think means it's going to be a staple somewhere in the format, whether it's as part of its own deck or just being an sort of an additional attacker in some of the other attacking options we have in format right now. Next up then, we've got another fun one. We've got Tool Drop. There's a new Bronzong in the set with the Tool Drop attack, and with the Reversal Energy, with Ignition Energy, you're actually able to play 8 energy cards and hopefully try and set this up quite consistently. Obviously, we've got the Reveroom that has the Tune Up ability that lets you attach multiple tools to it at once. So with things like Rigid Band, you can really get bulky and make it difficult to get the tools off the board to stop your opponent I guess, getting rid of your damage and mitigating how much you can do. But also things like the Lucky Helmets can help you draw through the deck if your opponent does target the Revavooms. And then things like Brave Bangle helping you, I guess, get yourself over the line for some of the tool drop damage against some of the bigger archetypes is going to be really useful. I guess having Genesect as well makes the deck a little bit more consistent. There's still some consistency issues here and there, but you can see we've tried to be as consistent as possible with all of our 3-ofs and 4-ofs of all of the important cards. And of course, it's worth noting we get to play that all-important Treasure Tracker A-Spec. You're not going to see this A-Spec very often, so it's a perfect one to play. You can search out for 5 tools, attach them all to your Revavooms, stick a Brave Bangle on your active Bronzong, and be dealing a huge amount of damage in just one turn. So yeah, definitely a fun one. Feels a bit Alakazam-y, feels a bit like one of these one-prize archetypes, which is never going to be crazy good in the format, but definitely a lot of fun regardless. So have some fun with this one. Tool Drop has been good in the past. I'm not sure it's going to be quite as good as it has been in the past in this iteration, but still one to try out and have some fun with. Next up, we have Mega Sharpedo. This is actually a City League list from the Japan City Leagues. Obviously, they've had these cards for a little while now, so they've tried out some of these cards, and this was one of the more successful Mega Sharpedo lists. Also one of the more recent ones, so this has been through some iterations. Now, obviously, we rated Mega Sharpedo relatively low, but there's definitely some benefits to playing this over the other Toxtricity Box decks. Because Tox needs to be on the board and only accelerates 1 energy, you often need 2 Toxtricity out, and because of that, it can get quite difficult having the bench management in some of these Tox box decks, whereas that doesn't really happen with this Mega Sharpedo as an attacker, because you often only need 1 Toxtricity out, because the attack only costs 2 energy, so you can just use your manual attachment for that second attachment. So because of that, you do have a bit more luxury of playing down the Monkey Dories, down the Petchurants, down the Tatsu, all of that kind of thing on your board, whereas you're not able to do that as consistently in some of the other builds of Toxtricity. Now, obviously, there still are some issues here. You have to often kind of weave together these combos with Grav Mountain or Binding Mochi to reach the numbers on Pokemon that you don't have weakness against. And you definitely could sub out things like Hero's Cape to be a little bit more consistent, like a Secret Box or something like that to increase your consistency. But I didn't want to adapt this list too much given its success in Japan and one of the recent City Leagues, so it seemed like a good one to show off the archetype. We're still not entirely convinced over here at OmniPoke on Sharpedo's success. It still felt like a 1-star card to us, but we're going to have to now try it at least. We have a good starting point to see how the list feels, and like I say, we've already kind of identified some of the issues with the Toxtricity Box decks that I guess initially sort of popped up. So because of that, we wanted to look into Sharpedo and see if it does help those bench management issues that other Toxtricity decks have sometimes. On to the first of a couple Gardevoir lists then. This is a straight Gardevoir. Obviously, the only real new card in this deck is the Mega Diancie, but it is a fantastic card. Not having Dark Weakness is actually so impactful. It's really, really important because it at least means that against all of these new Dark decks, you're able to represent something that isn't just going to fall over straight away because of weakness. Now, it is a 3-prize Pokemon with only 300 effective HP, but we do have Bravery Charm, and we are able to move damage off this with Monkey Dory, so it is still tanky at times, especially in combination with an Iono or something. It can sometimes be difficult for your opponent to knock this out, and also is doing enough damage to be able to take out something like a Fez, so you can try and slow down your opponent's draw support at the same time, which is very powerful. I've already mentioned it once, but here is that Poison Lopunny list. Obviously, Poison is a very splashable package with the Brute Bonnet and the Petchurant, as well as the Petchurant EX and the Perilous Jungles, all that kind of stuff. So we've seen decks like this in the past that have just slotted this package in to try and deal an additional amount of damage. Obviously, because of the Petchurant plus Perilous Jungle cards in the deck, you can actually donk people with this, which is pretty cool. But also, it really increases the Lopunny's damage output to something a lot more consistently, dealing 2 shots or sometimes even 1 shots into some of the multi-prize Pokemon, which is very nice. Obviously, with Mochi plus Perilous Jungle plus Poison, you can actually get up to like 290-ish, which is very, very powerful. It's actually 300 thinking about it. So yeah, 300 damage for just 1 energy is just crazy. So yeah, you're actually able to be potentially threatening one-shots on a lot of different Pokemon, and if they don't move their Pokemon, you can threaten the one-shot going back into your turn if they stay active with their poison Pokemon. So yeah, it's a different way of playing it. It feels like it's a much more aggressive, much faster way of playing Lopunny compared to the Dusknoir build that I mentioned earlier on. This feels like the real aggressive version, whereas the Dusknoir build felt like it was slower, setting up the board and then trying to win in a couple of turns. This just tries to win as quickly as possible, straight out the gate, similar to some of the Claw Poison decks that we'd seen in the past. This feels kind of similar to them with the Carmines and the Double Squawk and all that kind of thing. So yeah, just a hyper-aggressive way of trying to implement the Poison package into a Lopunny deck to take prizes as quickly as possible. I think there's still going to be issues here and there with some of the Pokemon that have really high HP, and also some of the Pokemon that can one-shot you, so you're not really trading them particularly efficiently. But the fact that you do have backdoor ways of being able to donk some of these evolving decks with Petch can sometimes steal games as well, which is pretty nice. So yeah, both of the Lopunny lists so far definitely have an element of like scam to them, trying to scam the opponent in one way or another, whether it's the poison donking or the Dusclops Dusknoir knocking your opponent's Pokemon out in multiple in the middle of the turn. And Lopunny feels like a great partner for both of those kinds of things, just because of how efficient it is. You don't need to invest a lot of cards into playing the Lopunny package. So yeah, another fun one to try out with Lopunny. Let us know whether you think the Dusknoir build or the Poison build is, I guess, the best way to play it down below after you've done some testing. Next up, we have Flareon then. This is actually only one card different from Emma's second place list from a couple of weeks ago. That list is pretty much spot on for this format, and you could definitely just run the list, the same 60 again. But we've slotted in a Dawn over the Serrano, because being able to use Dawn to search out the Pidgeot, plus the Noctowl, plus a Terra EX, feels like it's just a little bit more flexible than Serrano is. Obviously, you get one less EX Pokemon some of the time, but just having Dawn be able to unlock Noctowl as well is very, very powerful. So definitely want to try out. If you're happy just playing Emma's 60 though, still feels very, very good in this format right now. So yeah, one minor change. Still think this deck has a lot of legs going forward, so definitely give this one a go and see if Dawn feels impactful to you. Onto another build of Mega Absol, Mega Kangaskhan then, and this has weaved in a 1/1 Toxtricity line. This definitely feels like it helps. In one of the biggest issues with this deck, I think, is the energy management and the fact you're so reliant on Turbo Energize and then where those manual attachments go. And if you ever miss one of those manual attachments, it can feel pretty damning in this deck. So you really, really rely on Turbo Energize. And I think this just takes the pressure off a little bit, letting you maybe miss the Turbo Energize, or maybe get some more Monkey Dories into play with your manual attachments, because you know you can backdoor your way into Claw of Darkness with Mega Absol in a different way. Obviously, it also helps get some damage onto the board as well, which you can then fling over to the opponent's board with Monkey Dory, which can obviously help you gain some knockouts, but also just set up things like Terminal Period over a couple of turns on key Pokemon as well. So yeah, pretty similar to some of the other lists. We've still got things like the Aries in here, just to be as disruptive as possible, but it just gives you a bit of a safety net in trying to set up the Mega Absol, giving you that little bit more flexibility with your energy attachments, and just letting you hopefully get to Claw of Darkness a little bit more consistently, where you do have to split your energy because of Turbo Energize and stuff like that. It definitely gets you to that Claw of Darkness a little bit more consistently than some of the other builds right now, I think. Onto an updated version of Dragapult then, and realistically the only real upgrade to this deck this set is going to be Dawn. Dawn is really, really powerful though, letting you search out for, or having another card that searches for Dracloaks is very good, plus also getting your Dusclops pieces and Dragapult as well. So yeah, definitely feels very, very powerful. We've actually ended up cutting a Hilda for it in comparison to some of the other lists. Some lists only play one Hilda, some play two. Obviously things like Brock and Jacques come in and out of the list as well. But we've settled with two Dawn in this list, as well as sneaking in a couple of rare candy just to be able to have the ability to be quite aggressive with the Dusknoirs and Dragapults in certain situations. I've played a lot of Candy Dragapult over the past few weeks and to one of the regionals, and having the option or having access to candies is just really, really powerful to try and pressure your opponents as quickly as possible. So yeah, still got the candies in there. We've also got two Jamming Tower. I still think it's really important to play the Jamming Towers, and it might even be important to play a third stadium, just because you want to have active outs to trying to bounce Battle Cage. Because I must admit, the only bad thing about Dragapult, it doesn't really gain any new cards, but it is definitely a little bit afraid of the new Battle Cage stadium, because obviously it shuts off your Phantom Dive damage, it shuts off your bench damage on Dusknoir with Dusknoir and Dusclops, and also shuts off bench damage with your Monkey Dory as well. So it can be really important to bounce that stadium at certain points during the game. So you definitely want to have access to those outs. So I could see a third stadium going in here for sure, but you could just try and get away with two. But I think two is like the bare minimum right now, just for the people respecting Dragapult and jamming in the new stadium Battle Cage into their decks to try and help with that matchup. Next up then, we have an Empoleon list. Now, I will caveat this is from a City League. It's very, very slightly adjusted, but it's from a City League, so we haven't put too much testing into it, because obviously Empoleon does look to be on the weak side, but there was someone brave enough to take it to a City League who did end up getting a result with the deck, so there may be something here. This is definitely the best list to try out for the deck. Obviously, really trying to lean into the tankiness of the Empoleon with the Hero's Cape and the Full Metal Labs, but also having backdoor ways of being able to use Ogerpon is actually really nice when you've got the Metang engine to set up your Pokemon. So kind of having a cheeky win condition here with the Wellspring Ogerpon is quite nice, being able to represent something that your opponent maybe isn't expecting, which is very powerful. So yeah, definitely some cool ways, cool avenues that you can take with this deck. You can kind of go down a tanky route or just go down an aggressive route, trying to bully the evolving stage 2 Pokemon with the Wellspring Ogerpon instead. So yeah, a couple of different angles you can take this deck. Definitely take this one with a grain of salt. Obviously, it was only a successful City League list. We haven't seen too much more of it since then, but could be a fun one to try if you do enjoy a bit of Empoleon gameplay. Onto another hyper-aggressive archetype, then this is going to be Zacian Clefairy with an Iron Valiant package. This feels very reminiscent to Entei Valiant when that was a deck. It feels very, very reminiscent to that. Obviously, we already had a lot of these pieces, but just having the Wondrous patch to be able to power up Clefairy in a single turn is very powerful. It means that you do actually represent more than just the like aggressive nature of Hop Zacian on multiple different low HP basic Pokemon. You actually now can power up a Clefairy in one turn, which is pretty powerful because it means that you can finish off things that the Valiants and Zacians have set up in the early turns and sort of close out the game with something a bit more substantial, whereas the Zacian deck often sort of ran out of steam quite quickly. You now have a half-decent late game in Lily's Clefairy when you can power it up in a single turn, which is quite nice. Obviously at heart, we're still a very aggressive deck. We've still got all of the Postwicks and all of that kind of stuff, the choice bands to try and deal as much damage with Insta-Strike as possible to try and be aggressive into the evolving matchups. But Lily's Clefairy is obviously very good at dealing with the 2-price Pokemon, and when you've been able to set up damage with Insta-Strike and the Tachyon Bits ability to be able to, I guess, consistently trade 2 for 2, all you need to get is like a cheeky prize or an up trade here and there from something like a Cramorant or an early prize in the early turns, because you're going to be quite aggressive with this deck anyway. You can definitely try and run away with the game quite quickly with this deck. It still feels like there's going to be some flaws to the deck here and there, but I do think it gets much more consistent. It's not just this aggressive early game deck that has no late game and really peters out. It feels like having Lily's Clefairy now gives you access to being able to do some pretty powerful stuff. But just having Wonder Patch also for things like Mew EX and Valiant and being able to attack with even the Latias and stuff like that, you don't want to be doing it, but just having the option to, meaning that you have some late game bomb attacks that you don't usually have with a Zacian style deck, is very nice. It means that you have a little bit more gas in the late game. So yeah, probably an aggressive one to try in the early days of the ladder to try and get to Arceus tier, but could be a fun one to try and tinker with and see if there's anything there. Just the fact we have Clefairy plus Wonder Patch as a combination, I think there's something there for sure in comparison to some of the old Legendary Beast decks that we had with like Suicune and Entei and Raikou. So it feels like we're back to that with Lily's Clefairy. It's a little bit weaker, a little bit more frail, but still can be aggressive at certain times, I think. Next up, we have a brand new way of playing Gholdengo and a brand new way of playing Ceruledge all in one deck. This is actually a list from a City League in Japan. This is a Gholdengo Ceruledge list that actually has seen a fair bit of success. There's been a few different players playing this. It's kind of built around having access to the Fire Breather supporter, so you can use that as your Gholdengo's fuel. But it also has the Ceruledge in here to be able to help out in some of the mirror matchups, but also helps as just being another type. You're not necessarily a metal type. You've still got a lot of aggression you can do with the Ceruledge. But we also have the new Ceruledge that for 1 energy deals 220 damage if you discard 4 fire from your hand. So there's a lot of synergy in how you can use the superior energy retrievals here to uptrade with the baby Ceruledge or use them to fuel Make It Rain. So you can see kind of the natural combo here, as well as having access to some of the new useful cards like the Blowtorch card that lets you discard a fire to disrupt your opponent's board as well. There's a lot of things to like here. Now, I still think it's ultimately worse than Gholdengo Rocks because it's another stage 1 rather than just being like a basic draw engine, and you're back to really relying on your draw supporters and Fez rather than having the Lunatone Solrock combo to help draw through your deck. So I think ultimately it is just a worse version of that, but it is quite cool seeing ways of being able to play these new cards like the Fire Breather and the Blowtorch in these decks, and I think that's kind of going to be the only way we really see this Ceruledge as well. I don't think Ceruledge, or the baby Ceruledge, is going to be good enough in the regular Ceruledge deck overall. So yeah, it's kind of just jamming 2 good archetypes together and seeing if you can make something work. Like I say, I think it's slightly worse than the archetypes individually, the Ceruledge archetype and the Gholdengo Rocks archetype individually, but it could be a fun one to try if you want another way of playing Gholdengo. We already have many right now, but let's throw another one into the mix, see if there's a fun way of trying to get Fire Breather to work too. The final Absol Kang list we have is an Ice Cream Absol Kang. Obviously, the Jumbo Ice Cream heals for 80 damage from any Pokemon that has 3 energy attached to them. And both Kangaskhan and Mega Absol have 3 energy attached to them quite a lot of the time because they're the attacks that they're going to be using most of the time. So you can tank a hit and you can try and heal as much damage as possible with the Icy Cream and make these guys as tanky as possible to cause more frustration and disruption. I personally think this is a little bit weaker than like the Tox build, but I could see the Jumbo Ice Cream being played in certain situations just to be tanky. And when you have Arven, you're able to search out on the right turn, which is really, really useful. You could even play like a combination of some of these different Mega Absol builds to try and get some of these new cards in. So yeah, the Jumbo Ice Cream, definitely an interesting one. That in combination with Lively Stadium Bravery Charm as well. Obviously, it makes these Pokemon incredibly difficult to deal with. So yeah, could be definitely a way of playing it, whether it's in this list or whether it's in another Kangaskhan list we will talk about momentarily or in a few moments' time. I think there's definitely a space for the Jumbo Ice Cream somewhere in the format, whether it's in this deck or one of those other ones as well. We've got an updated Gholdengo Joltik list here. Again, no new cards, just our most up-to-date version. This was actually a really successful Japanese City League winning list that saw success in the past couple of weekends. So yeah, just wanted to highlight this as probably the best way of playing the Joltik Gholdengo archetype right now. I think there was a couple of adjustments we made for some of the attackers that were a little bit kooky here and there to definitely respect Zard. This list wasn't respecting Zard too much, so there are a couple of adjustments to make sure it was respecting Zard. But other than that, still a very consistent archetype, still pretty basic archetype, not too many flares or options or anything like that, but you're just trying to deal with whatever your opponent's board state they're setting up with the powerful attackers, and then you have things like Gholdengo to close out the game, as we've seen at some of the big tournaments and worlds so far. So yeah, updated Joltik Gholdengo list for you to try out here. Next up, we've got another Charizard variant. This is Noctowl Charizard. Dawn basically unlocks Noctowl. It really, really improves the card because it lets you search out a basic Terramon and a Noctowl and a Stage 2 as well to be able to start using the Dual Seeker ability much more consistently than you have been able to in the past. So it's a really nice addition for some of these Noctowl-based engines. As you can see, we've still got the 101 Pidgeot in here as well, just to smooth things over, as a lot of the TeraBox lists and some of the Flareon box and stuff like that, they all still play Pidgeot as well, but we're still primarily built around Noctowl here, and just having Dawn to unlock that is really, really good. Our basic Terror of choice is going to be Water Ogerpon, because actually with Charizard's acceleration, you can power up Torrential Pump potentially 2 turns in a row, which is nice, but we've also got the Crispin plus Crystal in here to be able to accelerate out in 1 turn as well, which can definitely catch opponents off guard if they're trying to play around big damage from Charizard. You can sometimes catch them off guard and take a couple of cheeky prizes with Torrential Pump, which is just really useful. And then we've also got the Battle Cage in here to try and help out with the Dragapult matchup a little bit more. Obviously, Charizard has always been pretty weak to Dragapult. We've only got 1 in here, so it's not great, but having the backdoor option of using Torrential Pump in the early turns to apply some pressure can sometimes take the pressure off of your Charmanders, and therefore you need less Charmanders to be able to get through the game. So you don't necessarily need the full count of the battle cages in here. You can get away with just the 1. Also because we like to go pretty wide on Area 0 Underdepths as well with all of our Noctowls and our Pidgeots and Charmanders and all that good stuff. Finally, of course, this gives Charizard a nice little bit of early aggression with Fan Rotom as well, which is always good because Charizard is pretty good at closing out the game. So now we have lots of options to try and take some cheeky prizes in the early turns and start pressuring the opponent here. On to our other Gardevoir list then, and this is just an updated Jelly Guardy list. As with straight Gardevoir, there's only 1 new card here. It's just going to be the Mega Diancie. But we do think the attacker is so good that it should see play in both variants of Gardevoir right now. Other than that, though, nothing too flashy. Obviously, the Gardevoir build without Jelllicent and with Jellicent naturally have some differences, so you can see them here in comparison with one another. But in general, our mindset has always been with Guardy just to try to be as consistent as possible. Playing high counts of all of the important cards, a thick supporter line, and not trying to get too cheeky with all of these different tech options, just having some consistent lines and trying to prove that you're the best deck in the format by just doing your thing as consistently as possible. Next up, we have TeraBox, and similar to some of the other Noctowl builds, the only new card in here is Dawn. But Dawn, like I say, does just unlock this deck, being able to search out for your basic Terra EX Pokemon and a Noctowl, and then in this case a Pidgeot. Obviously, we only play 1 Stage 2 in here, but being able to play or search for the Pidgeot then leads you to being able to use Dual Seeker to search for the rare candy, to get Pidgeot into play, and then you've just got quick search for the rest of the game, which really works perfectly in a deck like TeraBox because you're trying to weave together some powerful combo turns, deal with whatever your opponent is throwing at you with the variety of different attackers that your deck has, and making sure that you're able to consistently do that turn after turn and set up with whatever your opponent is trying to do against you. We're still respecting all the dark type archetypes with double tail mask plus Iron Leaves. We're still respecting Dragapult with Clefairy, and we're still respecting some of the big basics and stage 2s with Pikachu. So there's nothing too fancy here. We are trying to do everything and fit all of the different types of attackers that you may need into the deck as consistently as possible. But I think having Pidgeot helps do that, because you basically are able to not rely on just your Noctowls. You can often get there with one Noctowl plus Quick Search, which leaves your other Hoots open for later Duel Seekers to try and close out the game against your opponent. On to Toxtricity then, with a variety of different 2-prize attackers. We've got a couple of Pecharunt in here, we've got an Okidogi, we've got a Pheasantipity, we've even got the one of Monkey Dory EX in here, as well as an Absol and a Roaring Moon, to provide a bit of disruption and just a one-hit KO button for both of these Pokemon. Now, this was a list earlier on that I was talking about where board space can get a little bit tight. You often need at least 2 Toxtricity down to keep on chaining the attackers, which can get quite awkward when you need a Pecharunt and a Monkey down and stuff like that as well. And we have had to cut things like the Yveltal, which can be nice, but you rarely have the board space to be able to have that down, as well as being able to have your next attacker lined up that you can power it with Toxtricity. The full suite of attackers here should leave you with answers in a lot of different matchups. We've got lots of high damaging options, but also lots of options like the Monkey Dory that help against the 1-prize decks, because it is a 1-prize itself when Petch is on the board. And the baby Monkey Dories with Adrenabrain as well obviously also help try and deal some of the chip damage that you're going to be taking because of the Pecharunt's poison or Toxtricity's ability. And similarly to Absol Box, they can then be used to try and set up things like Terminal Period and stuff as well, which is nice. I think the deck looks super clean. I'm just not convinced that we've worked out the exact perfect number of attackers in here right now. And like I say, the board space can sometimes prove to be a bit of a headache here. But Dark is probably the best type to be in the game right now. We've got some great new support, plus some great attackers already in format, to be honest. So it's definitely going to be one I'm trying out to see whether it can be other things than just trying to be a big Guardy counter. Another updated aggressive archetype for you then. This is our most up-to-date Raging Bolt list. Again, no new cards. This is just an updated list to try and give you the best foot possible. I still think Raging Bolt is in a bit of an awkward position right now. I don't think it's in... I think it's really good at dealing with some of the 2-prize archetypes that have started to evolve and get a bit stronger into the format, but I think it still struggles with some of the evolving decks out there right now. So yeah, here's an up-to-date list for you for all of your Raging Bolt stands out there. Give it another go and see if it's the right time to come back to this archetype, whether the format is sitting right for it. We've got another fun one here from one of the city leagues. This is Mega Venusaur Meganium. This is a deck that I toyed around with it a little bit. I really enjoyed the Forest of Vitality Stadium, but obviously Mega Venusaur never really took off, especially with Ceruledge rising in popularity. 2 big highlights for the deck. Dawn is fantastic alongside the Forest of Vitality, letting you search for essentially a full evolution line, and if you've got Forest in play, immediately putting it down is very powerful. But also we've got the new Genesect that deals snipe damage based on the amount of grass energy attached to it, so you can move all your energy off your Teal Mask Ogerpons onto the Genesect and do a huge snipe from the Meganium. I still think this is a bit of a low tier archetype, but I think Dawn is actually a really big upgrade, and having a lot of good draw supporters in Lily and Iono, plus now Dawn as some sort of mid-game stabilization supporters for your Forest of Vitality and your stage 2s is pretty cool. So yeah, definitely one I'm probably going to have a play around with, even though I don't think it's going to be great. It was an archetype that I really enjoyed in the previous format, and I think it does get a little bit better with Dawn as well. So yeah, a fun one to try out for sure. Here's that tanky Kangaskhan list I mentioned with the quad jumbo ice cream. This is really trying to lean into the size of Mega Kangaskhan alongside Buffalance and Lively Stadiums and Bravery Charms. Now with all that damage reduction, you then get to heal the damage off with the quad jumbo ice creams, which is really nice. Alongside the Monkey Dories, I actually think you can get to the point where you're just not able to deal any damage to a Mega Kangaskhan because they're healing it off, they're Monkey Dooring it off, it's already being reduced. So I think this can get pretty big pretty quickly. Now, obviously, there's still some issues with some of the one-shot decks, and you're not going to get over that with having healing in your deck, because if they're just one-shotting you, you've got nothing to heal anyway. So you don't really solve that issue with the deck, but I do think it makes the other matchups that can't one-shot you even better because you now have that healing aspect as well. We've seen a little bit of Tank Kang in tournaments. It's never been too successful, but I think there is a bit more of a reason to play this now. It's obviously it's spiked some tournaments here and there, but I think there's definitely more reason to think about this now with the Jumbo Ice Cream. And I think there's genuine reason to consider this over the other Kangaskhan Absol lists instead as well. So yeah, give this one a go, see if Jumbo Ice Cream helps you in those matchups that aren't one-shotting, and then you have to really lean into things like the Cornerstone Ogerpons and some of the one-shotting matchups against things like Gholdengo there. Next up, we have Zoroark. Zoroark is an archetype I'm really interested in going into this format because I think it lets you play this really cool Grimsley Mega Gengar package that not many decks can play, I don't think. Now, obviously, any deck can just shove the Grimsley, the Mega Gengar, and the Academy Knight in there, but you have to give up your draw supporter for the turn to be able to Grimsley the Mega Gengar onto the board. And I think Zoroark is one of the best decks at being able to get away with that because you don't need to stop drawing cards because you can then just trade all of the other cards away. Plus, also in matchups where you don't need Mega Gengar or Grimsley or the Academy Knights, you can trade them away as trade fodder, but also Academy Knight is really good for setting up game on board next turn where you don't lose to an Iona. You can just store the way you win on the top of your deck next turn, so if they Iona you draw into it anyway. Now, obviously, there are some issues with the Mega Gengar ability. There's going to be certain decks that can get around how the ability works. But I do think this is the deck that can implement the Grimsley package into it the best, and definitely when I'm going to be trying out ahead of Stuttgart to see whether we can get to the point where our end Zoroark EXs are just worth one prize, because I think there's going to be a lot of decks that do not have the amount of resources to be able to deal with that, especially when Zoroark can actually trade up if they start hitting into you. It's a very difficult Pokemon to deal with, so I think there's a lot of merit here, and definitely when I'm going to be investing some time into ahead of Stuttgart in a couple of weeks' time. Next up, we've got another City League list here. This is a Crustle list that really leans into the Jumbo Ice Cream again. Obviously, Crustle is another great recipient of Jumbo Ice Cream, letting you heal off the damage. A lot of the time, if people aren't respecting Crustle, they end up having to sort of poke it over a couple of turns. That can sometimes be very difficult to deal with if there's Monkey Doras and stuff on the board, but now it's even more difficult to deal with if you're also healing off the damage with Jumbo Ice Cream as well. Now, I think there's definitely different ways you could play Crustle. Obviously, this is just focused on the Crustles and the Monkey Dories. You could definitely build in some of the other Pokemon that we've seen in the past, things like the Shuckles, which are a little bit less invasive than the Dark Energies that you have to play, and the Crispins and all that kind of stuff. Though you may want to play Crispins anyway. And even the Cornerstones, obviously it's not playing Cornerstone. This is really leaning into Crustle, so if your opponent has an out to Crustle, it's going to be very difficult for you to win. But I do think this then gives you the space to be able to play the Ice Creams and the Towers and all of that kind of stuff. Obviously, you can see it's a very, very heavy support account as well. So it definitely opens up the space, not playing some of these other disruptive Pokemon in your deck. Now, whether that's right or wrong, it's difficult to say. We'll have to test it out, but I think Jumbo Ice Cream could be a way of bringing back Crust a little bit and stopping your opponent just finding something that's dealing a small amount of damage against you over a couple of chip turns if they're not properly respecting Crustle in the first place. Next up, we have Ceruledge. This is just our most up-to-date Ceruledge list. Not too many exciting cards in here. The only new card is going to be a Battle Cage. It's definitely helpful for the Dragapult and the Guardy matchups from taking out your Ceruledge in the active, plus also Charcadex on the bench at once. That's often the strategy that they will look towards trying to set up. So adding in a Battle Cage definitely helps them from trying to wipe your board in one turn, which is kind of what these decks aim to try and do against you. Still think this is one of the best aggressive decks in the format right now, trying to be a heavy-hitting two-prize option to start attacking the Zoroark earlier into the late-game Ceruledge, taking out basically anything on the board with the amount of energy you get into the discard. So still think this is a very, very powerful archetype. Probably still going to be the most popular aggressive archetype in the format, and one that only changes very, very slightly, so you don't need to invest too much time, money, or energy into learning it in this new format as well, which is very cool. Next up, we have our final Lopunny list. This is just going to be Lopunny to Dunsparce trying to integrate a draw engine into the deck, whilst also then letting you move into the active for Lopunny's attack. Having access to Fan Rotom helps you set up your Dunsparces, but also set up your Baneries, and then you can use the Hilda engine, Hilda plus Enriching, to get the Dunsparce plus Enriching energy out, draw a load of cards, and then move into the active with your Lopunny and deal a huge amount of damage. Now, compared to the other Lopunny list, this is definitely going to be much more of a war of attrition. It's not going to try and scam your opponent and trying to win quickly. But I do think it presents more win conditions over a longer drawn-out game because you have things like Wally's Compassion, the Rigid Bands to really try and reduce the amount of damage your opponent can do, being able to reset the Lopunny's turn after turn, and try and just apply pressure of 230 every single turn on your opponent, whilst making it difficult to knock them out with things like the Rigid Band. I think this deck is definitely going to be an intricate one to play. I think there's going to be certain games that you're just not going to be able to win if you misuse your resources here and there, but I think it's going to be a rewarding one if you're able to learn it quite well. And I think it probably has a slightly higher ceiling than some of the other Lopunny decks, but I also think there's a lot more room for error, whereas things like the Poison package or the Dusknoir package. So yeah, definitely give this one a go. Let us know whether you think it's better or worse than the other two Lopunny builds down below, or maybe even whether Lopunny should just be a 1-1 tech in some decks out there right now that are looking for a cornerstone out, as well as an efficient attacker in the early game, and whether Lopunny doesn't quite have the legs to be its own deck overall. Next up, we have Greninja EX. Greninja has obviously seen a little bit of a resurgence in play here and there in certain situations. It's not been the most powerful Stage 2 deck, but some people have tried it out, and I've actually had this played against me twice in the past few tournaments that I've played in, and it's been pretty impressive in those tournaments against me. So I wanted to at least highlight it here as a potential off-meta Stage 2 pick. It does also gain Dawn, which is only a 1-of in the list, but I think will help increase the consistency. But you could definitely bump this up to 2 or maybe even 3, because once this deck gets into the game, it has Pidgeot, it has Shinobi Blade, it's able to tutor out those cards it needs quite specifically. So if you invest the time into getting your board set up with cards like Dawn, you often get the dividends paid back to you in the late game by being able to have some very, very powerful turns with things like Ignition Energy and counter catches and all that kind of stuff. And finally then, another fun one. Like I say, not all of these decks are super competitive, and this I don't think is going to be, but this is the RotomBox deck. This saw some play in one of the Japanese city leagues, and I don't think it's going to be super impactful, but it's another treasure tracker deck trying to build up your board with a load of tools, and then trying to use the Gadget Show attack on Rotoms of various different types to hit in the various different matchups based on the weakness you're trying to hit, as just this called one prize deck that can try and uptrade into some of the EX Pokemon right now. Now you can see we're playing Battle Cage, but obviously this deck is going to be pretty sad against the Gardevoirs and the Dragapults around, especially even with Battle Cage. I still don't think that stadium is going to be enough to keep you safe in those matchups. But I wanted to highlight it as just a fun final one to point out. I always like to pick a couple of fun decks from the Japanese City League results that come through in the first few weeks to highlight as some off-meta picks for the people that enjoy playing rogue archetypes. And this is probably the best one from the new set with the new Rotom's ability. So yeah, give this a go. It's not going to be super competitive, but I'm certain it will be a lot of fun to try out on the ladder. And that's it. That's over 30 different deck lists for Phantasmal Flames. Make sure you let us know down below which deck you enjoyed the most, or if there's anything on the list that we haven't added to the video. Tell us what decks you've been playing. Enjoy Phantasmal Flames, and we'll see you soon for another video.